The Florida Gators have added a ton of talent in recent weeks to their 2026 recruiting class, but still need some help on the defense.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever it's in the podcast and on YouTube. I am Brandon Olsen. Happy Monday. Florida Gators added a lot of talent in recent weeks. Today's episode of Locked On Gators brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And while the Florida Gators added a ton of talent in recent weeks, they still have a few glaring spots to address, which, by the way, this is not the time to get concerned about that or to start panicking about that at all, because a month and a week ago, we were talking about a recruiting class that had one player in it. Now you've got 13. So this isn't a thing to panic about. It's just something that they still need to address. And yes, they added 2027 athlete Tremont Collins to their 2027 class this past weekend. We will talk about that another day this week. But the Florida Gators need some more help on the defensive side of the ball. I think for me, it's defensive line defensive line edge group, which I'm just going to group them together because it's the front four. But I think that's a spot where you really need some help there because you've got JaReylan McCoy committed. He's listed as a defensive lineman, probably going to start out at the edge there for Florida. I almost said the University of Florida, and I don't know why I called it its government almost, but that's what happened. So JaReylan McCoy is committed right now, and you've got him in your D-line edge group. Jameer Perez is committed right now in your D-line, just D-line group. He's not going to go to the edge, but he's committed right now. But pretty much since he committed, he was like, hey, I'm not going to take any visits. And then an Ohio State visit scheduled. And, well, now there's a lot of traction for Ohio State here. Isn't surprising, right? This is a kid from Ohio that I felt like even when he said, hey, I'm not going to take any more visits, it kind of felt like hey, I'm not going to take any more visits unless it's Ohio State, which was always going to be a thing because like we've talked about a trillion times, there are some states where it's really hard to go into that state and take talent from them. Historically, LSU has been one of those states, or one of those Louisiana has been one of those states where kids normally go to LSU. Ohio, kids normally go to Ohio State. There's not many states where that's the case, but there are some, and Ohio State's one of them, especially on the defensive line. Larry Johnson is one of the most well-respected defensive line coaches in the entire country, if he's not the most well-respected defensive line coach in the country. But for Florida, you've got one guy that you feel solid about the commitment right now in JaReylan McCoy, and another guy in which you feel really not solid about that commitment right now. And for me, it's partially defensive line because Florida doesn't have the defensive line commits yet stacked up, which again, I don't find that concerning. The Gators are in it right now for a ton of guys, right? Or have been in it right now for a ton of guys. But those same guys that we were talking about, a couple weeks ago, were like, oh yeah, they're going to be taking their official visit to Florida. They're going to be doing this, that, and third. Those guys have started to make their initial commitments, right? We saw Vodney Cleveland committed this past weekend to Texas, which was not unexpected. A couple weeks ago, it felt like Florida, but momentum significantly shifted towards Texas in recent weeks, or we'll say the past 10 days-ish. Things change. There have been quite a few players where Florida's been in on it, hasn't gotten them. Ashari Charles is someone who was on campus a few weeks ago, taking an official visit to Florida. He committed to Miami yesterday, which I can't speak to how much of a take he was, but either way, it's someone that Florida was recruiting, and he's not a Gator. Again, a lot of these kids that we're talking about that will be flying off the board, some of them are going to pick Florida, some of them aren't. But either way, this ain't over till it's over, right? And so when signing day comes, I'll be more concerned about it. But after that significant, just huge wave of recruiting that Florida had, it's important to just acknowledge, hey, what's next? What positions are next? What positions are still needed here? Because obviously, we could talk about, or we have talked about offensive line recruiting before. And right now they're pretty good there. You got 4 offensive linemen committed. You got some traction there. You might only take 1 more. Personally, I would take at least 2 more, maybe even a third, because it feels like Florida's in it for bigger players than usual. And I think that's important. And by bigger players, I don't mean just, ranking. I mean guys with higher floors, because they always take guys with high ceilings. But right now, I think they've got guys with higher floors as well. And so keep adding talent there. Florida also just last week officially dismissed Stephon Shivers after his legal issues. And that leaves you a little bit thinner on the defensive line where you were already pretty thin. And so for me, part of it is just looking at the room's already thin, and or the rooms, I guess, because we're talking about defensive line and edge group right now. But the rooms are already pretty thin, at least on the interior. And you've got a lot of guys who are NFL draft eligible after this year. That's not saying that they become NFL draft eligible. It's just saying that this is the list of guys that are just, I put it as just competing for spots on the 2 deep. These guys are NFL draft eligible in the D-line and edge room. You got Brian Taylor, Caleb Banks, JaReylan, Tarverese Brown, Kofi Asari, George Gums, Cameron James, Tyreek Sapp. You got 8 guys that we're talking about as competing for opportunities on the 2 deep that are all NFL draft eligible after this year. And you've got some that have to leave, right? Like Caleb Banks, Tyreek Sapp, they have to leave. So they have to be gone. George Gums, I think a lot of people expect him to be gone. You've got a lot of guys that can go. If JaReylan bounces back and has the year in 2025 that many people thought he would have in 2024 before he got hurt, he can go to the draft. You have a legit opportunity to lose 4 to 5 guys that are significant contributors in this defensive line and edge group, which is a good thing to have, right? Like, it's great to have NFL talent throughout, but it's also a thing where you have to account for that in recruiting. And look, they've done a decent job. Let me backtrack for a second. They've done a damn good job of recruiting defensive linemen in recent years. I think that maybe a bit more quantity would have been appreciated, but I do like how they also go for quality, and then they can look into the transfer portal if they're looking to add players. Like, that's why I get where people say, hey, go add talent, go add talent at this spot, whatever, we need 5 guys to come in the defensive line edge room. I'm just throwing a number out there. And you could say, hey, just go get all that from high school. But Florida seems like they're more content going, hey, we're going to add 3 early-ish. If we need 5, we're going to go 3 early-ish. And then we'll look for at least 1 in the portal, maybe a second. And if we don't see something that we like in the portal, then we'll go with a high school kid that's still around that we feel comfortable in developing. So I'm cool with the approach that they're taking, genuinely. It's just right now, defensive line, edge, I count it as really you've got 1 guy that I feel comfortable with the commitment, and 1 guy that with JJ Perez. Honestly, I'm just sitting here going, I feel like he's going to decommit at any point now, right? Like, I'm recording this late on Sunday night, and he could decommit before this even comes out. That's how strong I feel that it's likely he's going to decommit. And it's not a thing that I blame him. I'm not going to go, yeah, they threw the bag at him or anything like that. It's just, it's an Ohio kid being recruited by Ohio State. They don't get told no often from players in their own state. It's just not a thing that happens. And it's part of the risk of going for someone who isn't from that or isn't from your area. We see it all the time with USC. We talk about it where USC goes for these kids from Georgia and Alabama and Florida, and they commit early, and then they're not in the class because they go, actually, you know what? I don't want to be that far, or I don't want to be able to not take unofficial visits at the drop of a hat like I can do with these local schools. Like they get the advantages there. And so defensive line edge is just a spot where you need to add some more talent. And again, this isn't to sound an alarm or anything. This is just to say that right now, I think that's the number one priority. We are going to stick with defense still because honestly, all these spots are on defense. We'll talk about that with Locked On Gators. Summer sports are in full swing. Jack Caglione is looking like he's finally getting up to major league speed. And whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. And you're already following the action, right? So why not make it just a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game with your friends, and while they are getting sunburned at the beach and you're enjoying it nice and comfy. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. You open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, everything in the podcast and on YouTube. And the next position that we are talking about for the Florida Gators, where you got to kind of again, I'm not saying this to sound an alarm. I am not sounding panicked at all. But for me, corner is another spot, which I don't think should be surprising to anyone. Florida currently has one cornerback committed. And I firmly believe, 3 to 4 should be the target every year. That's always been the thing. And look, in the 2025 class, you took 3. You took Ben Hanks III, you took Javari Flowers, and you took Onis Kananbani. So you took 3 in this most recent class. That's good. Guys in corner room that are competing for spots on the 2 deep that are NFL draft eligible. Devin Moore, who will be gone. Dijon Johnson, who could be gone. Cormani McClain, who I know is not someone that people think, oh, we might only have 1 year with him. But let's just call a spade here. Cormani's incredibly physically talented, right? He looks like he's been in the weight room. Like you see the videos that come out, the pictures that come out. He's clearly bulked up a good bit. So you've got that going. If he ends up earning a starting spot or a significant contributing spot, if he's corner 3 and he's putting out really good film, he's probably going to come back for 2026. But there's no guarantee. If he gets a starting spot and has a really good year, he's probably gone. If we're being honest, if Cormani earns a starting spot and has a really good year, has the kind of year he could have, he's probably gone because NFL teams are going to covet his physical tools. And so you've potentially got those 3. Michael Caraway Jr. is also going to be in the room. And then I believe he only has 1 year of eligibility coming over from Southern Miss. But 4 guys competing for spots on the 2 deep, which means 4 players. So potentially all 4. And look, there's going to be guys like Jameer Grimsley, Teddy Foster developing. One of the freshmen will probably find their way into playing time. But you are facing a potential year where you go, all right, well, we could lose our top 4 snap getters at corner. You got to add just talent there, right? And look, there's a good bit of youth in the room. I mentioned a couple already. So there's a good bit of youth in the room. But let's be real. Odds are someone will portal out at some point. I'm not saying it's going to be a 2025 kid. It could be a 2024 player that portals out, but odds are there's going to be someone that portals out at some point from these rosters or from these classes in these position groups, which again, not saying that it's a bad thing. It could be attrition by someone who isn't going to earn playing time. Not saying that you're going to lose a starter or anything like that, but depth matters here. So odds are someone will portal out. You've got quite a few guys that are draft eligible going into this year, and let alone coming out of this year as well, that are going to be draft eligible. You can lose some bodies there. You got CJ Bronaugh for the Florida Gators last week. And I think it was on Friday we put out an episode with the CJ Bronaugh scouting report. And I also put out my personal rankings of the commits so far, all 13. And CJ Bronaugh was at the top of the list. I think he's the best commit in the class right now. He's my favorite commit in the class right now. And to me, it's not just that he's, the best of the class. I think that he is a cream of the crop player. I think that's the kind of corner that is committed to the Florida Gators right now, is a cream of the crop player, like someone that I can look at and I say, I love having that player at the top of the class. I think you just got to add players under him, but having that player at the top of the class is just like, all right, well, odds are we're not getting someone better than him. And I'm not talking ranking. I'm saying that odds are, as a recruit, as a player, we're not going to find someone better than him as a high school target. That's it. And that's not to go, Florida can't get guys that good. It's that there aren't many corners that good. I don't care what the ranking is. I'm watching CJ Bronaugh and I'm like, all right, well, that's a guy that's going to make big time plays on Saturdays. I'm looking forward to stuff like that. So CJ Bronaugh is someone that I look at and I go, all right, well, cream of the crop player, top of the class, just about getting people underneath him. And Florida has, under Billy Napier, had a few guys where when we get closer to signing day, it doesn't so much feel like Florida is truly in the mix for them, or it doesn't really feel like Florida has all their corners filled out. There's guys that we haven't heard much traction for from Florida, whether that's they took visits early in the cycle and then it died down, or they took visits early in the cycle, committed to Florida, and then we didn't really hear much. But under Billy Napier, it's happened now 2 or 3 years in a row where there's a player that Florida doesn't really seem like they're in on publicly. And all of a sudden, Florida comes sweeping in around signing day and landing the commits. Like this past class, you could argue 2/3 of the corners that you got committed were guys that I don't think that non-Florida people really thought Florida was in on it. I think that if you ask fans outside of Florida's fan base about Onis Konanbani or Javari Flowers a couple months before signing day, I don't think that if you went, hey, what corners are they in on? I don't think that those names would have come up if you were asking non-Florida fans, or hell, even if you were asking some Florida fans or a good deal of Florida fans. I don't think you would really get the answer of them if you asked them in early October, hey, who's Florida in on at these spots? But Florida got them. And Jameer Grimsley, Jamrock Grimsley, is, of course, a different scenario where he was between Florida and Alabama, chose Alabama. Nick Saban retired, came right over to Florida. But Florida's done it where they add guys to the class late at corner. That's been a trend of theirs. We'll see if it continues to be that with the change in coaching staff again, or position coaches again. So we'll see if that stays. But that's been something that they've done for a couple years now, and I would expect them to kind of stick with that, where it's like, hey, I do think this year they've been a lot better at identifying talent earlier, which is crazy because that's something the staff is really good at. But that Florida will probably add more guys late in this class. I think if you could add a guy where you look at him and you say, all right, well, that could be the Robin to CJ Bernard's Batman. That's huge. I think that corner, again, is a spot where you just need bodies, which, knowing Florida, they're going to find long athletes and get them to come to Florida. That's what they've done at corner. That's what they will probably continue to do there. We're going to talk about linebackers when we wrap up today's show with Locked On Gators. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Gators, we're talking about linebackers. That is a position that they need to add to the class, because linebacker is one of the very few spots where they don't have a commit right now. That's it. None committed right now. I think that they'll wind up with probably 2. If not 3. I've said before, I would take 2 or 3 here, similar to running back. We've done a really good job recruiting those positions, in my opinion. But you've got attrition coming up. and with linebackers specifically, in 2026, so let's go to this year. For 2025, you will have Pup Howard and Jaden Robinson, both draft eligible, both, I think, going to be starters this year. And if they both have the years that they can go. And again, I'm not projecting them to leave. It's not about projecting who's going to be gone right now. We're in June. We don't know who's going to be gone. I know that there's people who think Pup Howard will be back for 2026. I know there's people who think Jaden Robinson will be back for 2026. But we don't really know what they're going to do on the field this year. We don't know how damn good they're going to look this year. They could both look horrible, right? Like let's just, again, we're honest here. We try to be as unbiased as possible. They could both be horrible. They could both be amazing. They could both go. And so that's my point, is that it's not about thinking, well, this guy's not going to have a good enough year to go. It's thinking this guy is eligible, and so he's at risk of leaving. So let's try to fill that out now. Let's get ahead of the curve so that if he does leave, we're not stuck going, oh, we thought he'd be back another year. Fans can do that. I spend time in Twitter spaces, right? Fans in there can go, hey, this guy should be back. This guy's going to be gone, right? He's a third-year guy, but he's going to have a great year, and he's going to declare. People say that all the time. We don't really know, and we're allowed to say those things and be wrong, right? I know there's people who talk about me being wrong on things, and I don't get paid to be right. I get paid to be me, which is I'm going to be honest about things, whether I'm right or wrong. I'm going to be as educational as possible and as entertaining as possible about them. That's it. I don't get paid to be right. That's not part of my job description. Being right is something I want to do, and it's something I try to be, but it is what it is. I'm allowed to be wrong. As a coach, you're not allowed to be wrong on things. You're not allowed to be left there going, oh, we thought he'd be back. Now we're screwed. Like, it's not the same. I can say, oh, I thought, like, Pup can have a great year and then declare. And I can say, oh, I thought Pup would be back. Damn, wonder what they're going to do. As a coach, you're not allowed to go, oh, I thought Pup would be back. Don't know what I'm going to do. Not allowed to do that. So they need to be prepared for guys that are NFL draft eligible. That's why I'm harping on the eligibility stuff. So Pup Howard, Jaden Robinson, both eligible. In 2026, whether you've got Pup and Jaden back or just one or neither of them, you will have Myles Graham and Aaron Childs back. And by the way, 2026 for them will be their draft eligible season. So let's say Pup and Jaden both go. They both declare. You can have Myles Graham and Aaron Childs potentially for 1 year as starters before they go again. So in 2026, you'll have Myles and Childs and Ty Jackson and Miles Johnson, who were from the 2025 class, which I didn't say, but from the 2025 class, maybe Pup, maybe Jaden Robinson, maybe both. But if Pup and Jaden, or just one of them, leaves, Myles Graham, Aaron Childs, whoever takes a starting spot, lives up to the hype, they might not be there in 2027 when the kids in this 2026 class will be sophomores. That's why, and I've said this before, I don't like freshman linebackers playing a lot. I don't like to be reliant on freshmen in any way. If they work out, great. I just don't like the plan being, hey, these freshmen are going to be playing. I just don't like banking on that. I think they're just so volatile. So I don't like banking on freshmen contributing significantly. If I want them to play and rotate and get snaps so that they're accustomed to the speed and they get adjusted, but I don't want them playing a ton. And that linebacker, you got to be really smart and really fast, mentally and physically fast. So it's just tough there with some guys. And while Florida doesn't have any commits right now at linebacker, I think that they will wind up with at least Malik Morris. He's a guy that I feel very confident saying, I think Florida is the clear favorite for him right now. And if he commits at any time, I wouldn't be shocked. He was on campus this week, and I thought he might commit. Or this weekend, and I thought he might commit. It was always a possibility. Isaiah Williams was one time committed to Florida. Florida is still very much in the fold for him. He took an official visit last week. Last week, he took an official visit. So the weekend of the 13th, he took his OV to Florida. And again, I know that there's a lot of fans that are going, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want that. I know myself personally, if I was in their shoes, I probably wouldn't deal with it either. But the fact of the situation is that they are still open to it. And that says a lot to me about their interest. And I've also said this with Izayia Williams. I think he's someone who's better fit long-term for an edge spot, which is fine. There's people who felt that way about Miles. There's people who felt that way. Actually, both Miles, Graham and Johnson. There's people who felt that way about. There's people who felt that way about Aaron Childs. So it's fine to feel that way. It doesn't mean I'm right. But they're very much in the fold there. DQ fork putt, I don't think so much because I do think that Malik and Izayia would be higher priorities. But Florida's still pushing for these players, right? Linebacker, again, not a spot that I'm super concerned about. Personally, I think that you're most likely going to lose at most one linebacker after this season. I would probably – actually, I don't even know who I'd lean toward, Pup or Jaden, but I don't think you lose both. I can project that again, and that can be wrong. But I don't think you lose both. I think that you will have a ton of talent for 2026. But again, this is about – when you're recruiting for 2026, you're not really recruiting for guys that are going to be part of your plans in 2026. You're recruiting guys that are going to be part of your plans in 2027 and 28 and 29. And so I think that's where it comes down to where, sure, you could return both Pop Howard and Jaden Robinson, and it might not impact your plans for 2027 much at all because or for 2026 at all, because you'll still have Miles and Childs and Ty and Miles. You'll have a lot of talent there. It's just about 2027 and beyond, where right now we don't know. And it's also kind of impossible to know because that's so far in advance. But that's college football recruiting. And it ain't for the weak. It ain't for the faint of heart. But it's damn entertaining. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. We will be back tomorrow at the absolute latest. Talk more Florida Gators football. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I will see you all next time.